We're so much better together.
Welcome to episode 3 of a conversation that we're doing called Race in America, and this has been incredible so far. If you missed last week's with Philip Causey and AJ Bass, just amazing. Need to go back and watch it. And part of the reason I'm doing this series of conversations is because race has been a scar on our nation since its beginning. And it's affected a lot of different things. And certainly in these days with the events around George Floyd and other events that have happened, it's just in the national consciousness right now. And I really believe that God has answers for us that are part of the answer is for us as individuals making choices and really making choices to love each other no matter what our differences are. And when we as individuals begin to make those choices, it really changes our world. But to do that, it requires something of us. It requires genuinely listening and really hearing each other and having authentic conversations, which is why I'm doing these conversations so that we can do that and hopefully do it in a healthy way, in an honoring way, and yet it be really authentic and really real. So today, I have some really special guests with me. I have Tanya Johnson, who's here. She's part of our Wylie community, and her and her husband, you're business owners, and they have a couple of kids in Wylie ISD. And then Chief Anthony Henderson is here with us. He's the chief of police here in Wylie, and just so privileged to have both of you here. And it's just an honor. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
And
appreciate it.
Why don't you guys take just a moment, just real quick, tell us a little bit about yourselves. Tanya, why don't you start? Who's your family? What's your business? All that kind of stuff.
Well, we have a party rental entertainment business. It's called Fun Times Party Rental. So when you see the big bounce houses or water slides or children's trains, that's what we do. We've been doing that for about 13 years. We live here in Wylie. We moved here about 13 years ago. And like you said, I have 2 teenage boys, a 13-year-old in junior high and a 15-year-old at Wylie East.
Great.
And so, we're just a part of this community. And so we're part of the ones that helped organize the Black Lives Matter rally that we had in downtown.
Yes.
And I believe that's why you invited me to speak. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. And Chief, tell us a little bit about you.
So my name is Anthony Henderson, Chief of Police here in Wylie. I've been in Wylie for February, be 22 years with the department. I'm married to my wife, Melody. We have 3 boys. One's 24 years old with a 3-year-old grandson, and I have a 15-year-old and an 11-year-old.
All right. Well, thank you. Again, thank you both so much for doing this, and I'm really happy to be here with you and having this conversation. So I wanted you to talk a little bit about the lead up to the Black Lives Matter rally that we had here in Wylie Sunday before last. And as you said, Tanya, you were one of the organizers of it. And Chief, you were obviously involved, and there's just such a great story there. So I don't know who wants to start, but just talk a little about the lead up to that, some of what you were hoping for, some of the things you were afraid about, and just share a little bit about that. Tanya, you want to start?
Sure. Emily is the one that first did the event, and when she put the event out on Facebook, she really didn't have a shape or any idea. She just knew she went to like a Frisco rally and she wanted to do something here in Wylie. So I reached out to her and I said, whatever you need, just let me know, I'll help. Like the generic thing you say. And then she actually responded, help.
And you were like, yikes.
Right. And so that's kind of how I came on board. And then we had our first sit-down planning meeting, and that's when we sat down with the chief. And for me, I did go up with my walls up. He probably could tell. I had my hands crossed, and I was firmly in my corner, but the more we started talking, the more we started dialoguing, it's like it kind of humanizes everybody, so you can let those walls down and kind of receive the message a little bit. And I know not everyone's equipped or ready to have that conversation, but at some point, you know, when all the protests and all the things are done, we have to have this conversation and figure out how to go forward.
Yeah, that's so good. Talk a little bit about just the walls that you had. What were some of your preconceived notions going into that?
It wasn't necessarily a preconceived notion, because I know the bad apple theory. There's a few bad apples.
Sure.
My thing was, how are other police holding other police systems accountable, and what changes are going to be made? So when we first went in there, I was sitting there thinking about, I want to talk about diversity, I want to talk about community policing. And then when he sat down, he started explaining all these things, and I was like, oh, you can see in the last 5 years, they're at least making those changes. You know, and I know it's easier here in Wylie because our crime rate is low. We're a smaller community. He gave me his cell phone number, which I probably shouldn't be telling, but I can have access to the people that run the systems. And I know it's a lot different when you live in a city like Houston, Dallas, or Atlanta. So it wasn't so much of a preconceived notion, because we have cops in the neighborhood that I know, like Helen, and we work with Mike Stewart. So it wasn't that. It's just I didn't want to look like I was being friendly with people that we were protesting, instead of just kind of sitting down at the table when he said, what's next? I didn't know what was next, and I didn't have a plan for what was next. I just know we're upset, we're angry, and we want to do this. And so just hearing him talk, hearing more about his life, and actually the steps that Wylie in particular is taking, that kind of let down the walls. And then when he says, what's next, I realized someone has to do it, because Emily was the first to even try. And then I got on board with that. So I was like, who is next? Who else can speak if everybody's in their corners?
So good. Which is why we're having this conversation, because it actually works. Yeah, Chief, talk a little bit about your going into that and your thoughts, concerns.
So when we first saw a post, we weren't contacted that this event was going to happen. We were actually monitoring Facebook for some other stuff that had come out a week prior to this. So when we saw this post, we were like, this is about to happen, and we're not even prepared for it.
Right.
So we kind of watched it for probably a day, just seeing how big the event was going to get, because we had no idea really how big it was going to be. We've seen a lot of people post a lot of things that never really materialized. So for us, once as a department, once we realized that this is really gaining some steam, so we reached out to Emily. I wanted to make contact with her and kind of see what her plan was. Yeah. And when I contacted her, and she goes, I don't really know. And I was going, oh man, this is going to be a lot of work. One of the things I wanted to make sure that she kind of knew is that, look, we have to come up with a plan together. We're in this together, and we have to come up with a plan, because there's a lot of things that go into this. And what are we going to do if this crowd turned hostile, or they started trying to damage things? And I think when we started talking about some of that stuff, she admittedly said, I feel so overwhelmed right now. Yeah, and sure. So I told her, I said, I want you to relax. We're in this. We're going to help you out. We're going to work through this. So when at that point, all we knew is that Emily was the one that was kind of setting this up. And then Angela had reached out, Tanya had reached out, Arlene had reached out, and we knew that we had different people trying to do events. And we really talked to them and said, hey, we already have an event that's kind of going. Would y'all be willing to help each other out? We were extremely excited the fact that they wanted to work with each other and help each other out, because we knew it was going to be a big project. So then when they kind of reached out to me, and Emily had reached out and said, hey, we're going to meet at Conversations. Would you be willing to meet with us? And I said, absolutely, I would. I want to be there. Yeah. So I kind of went into that similar. We kind of have our walls up. I think that's human nature sometimes for us. It's kind of our protection. I wanted to go in, and I really wanted to see what is it that What is it that you're trying to accomplish? What is it that you want to see in this
Sure.
community? And I kind of went in also going, how are they going to look at me?
No doubt.
I'm a white guy,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And I'm a police officer. And so I walked into this going, what if they don't really want to hear from me? And so when I sat down, Angela had actually said, Tanya had actually said, are you nervous about this? And I go, about this meeting or about this event? And she goes, about this today. And I said, no, I'm perfectly fine with this. So just kind of be a little bit clear, I have anxiety.
So you basically lied? Is that what you're saying?
I wasn't nervous I really wasn't nervous about meeting them. I was nervous about the actual event.
Sure.
But what was coming across is anxiety. So I have anxiety, so I have to kind of deal with that. So I was like, man, do they see this as me being nervous about them?
Oh, I see.
So I had actually stopped early on and I said, I think you first need to know who I am, what I'm about, and what our department is about, so you can see what it is that we're doing right now. And I think you would have a better idea of your questions for me based off of that.
Yeah, that's great.
So really, I went in there and I kind of shared with them what we're doing in the department. So there's really about 6 things that I regularly say to the department on a regular basis. And first one is, treat people the way you would want somebody treating your family member. I think that's pretty simple. You know, I mean, if I wouldn't want somebody talking bad to my family member, why would I talk bad to somebody in the community?
Yeah.
The other thing is I have 5 principles, values that we adhere to, and the first one is servant leadership. Clearly, Jesus Christ was the perfect servant leader. We're nowhere near that, any of us. But servant leadership is about putting the needs of others before your own.
Yeah.
And internally, that's important. We need to do that because we serve the community.
Yeah.
And we know that. We have to know that. We have to recognize that I serve the citizens.
Yeah.
The other one was...
It's amazing how easy that is to forget along the way. You know, it becomes about the task, the job, whatever the situation is.
Sure.
We all do that, I think.
I think we all have to be reminded of that.
Absolutely.
And that's why it's really an ongoing message that's talked about in our department. We talk about hard work. Nobody ever said this was going to be easy for any of us, right? And this is a good example of this. We have to put forth hard work to make this change. We got to be willing to sit down and talk about it. Positive attitude. I think attitude drives us, good or bad. It's the catalyst that pushes us forward. Support is another one. And support is a two-way street. So it's not, I can't want something that I am unwilling to give. I have to be willing to give that support to citizens. I have to be willing to give it to Tanya. I have to be willing to give it to everybody else in the community if I want that back.
Yes.
And then ethics. And I tell the officers all the time, we've always heard, throughout the academy all the way up through our careers, we've always heard an ethical officer is the one that does the right thing when nobody's watching. Well, I'll tell you that's half of it. The other half is doing the right thing when everybody's watching and it might not be popular.
Yeah.
So if you go back to George Floyd's incident, if you ran off the principles and values I've just spoke about, we tore all the way through all of those.
Yeah.
I mean, we didn't really, we would not have adhered to our own principles and values in the Wylie Police Department just based on that incident.
Yeah, that's really good. It's really good. Yeah, and it's amazing how it's really simple things, you know, just treat others the way you want to be treated. That's an amazing truth that so easily slips away so quickly, and it's so powerful. So I just want to commend you guys and the other organizers, all of you, Chief, you too, because I feel like there's a lot of really good leadership that happened going into that. I mean, you guys engaging each other, you could have not done that. I mean, you could have just said, no, forget you guys, we're going to do our own thing. And then you guys would have had to scramble and try to figure out, how do we manage this? It's law enforcement and all that. And the likelihood of it going south then rises dramatically. So I just want to commend you guys. So much good leadership there, and deferring to each other, and really wanting the best for the community, not just the best for what I want right now, which is huge. So well done. And I love it that you guys have a relationship. All of you didn't get to see it, but when these guys came in, they just spontaneously gave each other a hug, and I was like, this is awesome. So good. So, man, it's really cool. So thank you for being the people that you are. You mentioned integrity. That's what I see with both of you. So talk a little bit about how you experienced the rally itself. I was there, and I was honestly going into it, I just had no idea what to expect. I'm like, see all the TV reports, and it's all terrible, and all this terrible stuff happens. But I thought, man, I had heard that you were going to speak, Chief. So I thought, wow, these people are really, whoever's organizing this, and I didn't know you at the time, of course, whoever's organizing this is really thinking through these issues, and how do we come together rather than how do we divide, and how do we get real change? So I thought, I'm going. I'm going to go, and I'm going to be a positive presence there. And I was so pleased, honestly. I thought the speakers were fantastic. I love that you had a wide range, older people, younger people, law enforcement, not law enforcement. I just thought it was really, really well done. So great job to you and the other organizers. How did you guys experience it? Talk about how did you experience the whole thing?
I don't think we got to experience it like y'all did, because all throughout we had to make sure the speakers were there and the logistics.
I know what that's like.
All of those things. So a lot of times we were running around, but when we did get a chance to just listen, I thought there were some phenomenal speakers out there. I really liked Abina from SMU. Because I think she really spoke to the crowd to say, like, this isn't just like a kumbaya session. There's real honest work that we need y'all to do. There's real things that we need to discuss, and we shouldn't have to always be the ones to do the work or ask y'all to come in and to do the work. So that was a proud moment for me. Also, I just wanted to make sure the kids in Wylie ISD had a voice in a safe space, because when all of this came out about Wylie ISD and these allegations of racism and homophobia, it was all like, oh, this side, he's such a great person, which kind of just means this side is not. And so it's like, did you reach out to these kids? Because they're sweet kids too. They're sweet, decent human beings too, and these things are real to them. So with the rally, I just wanted to make sure their voices
They had a voice.
Were elevated, and they got to speak truth to power, because that's really what this is about. So I do love all of the community coming together, and that was a highlight for me, just the turnout itself. But I also wanted some real hard dialogue to be had, and not just the safe, make you feel good type of dialogue going on, because protesting is about taking on power.
Yeah.
Right.
Something's not right here, and we need to adjust.
Yes, we need to adjust.
Yeah, and if you don't ever say that, then it's like, what did we do that for? So, I thought it was well done. I really thought it was well done across the board. Chief, how did you experience it? How did your department experience it?
So going into this, we were nervous.
Yeah.
I mean, we really were. Wylie hasn't really had anything like this before, so,
Yeah, I talked to some of the guys ahead of time, and they were definitely nervous. So.
Just like everybody else. I mean, we see what's publicized on the news, which we know that that's not always accurate. However, I wasn't concerned about Wylie, because I think that we have seen enough with this community coming together under difficult times. I think what I was concerned with was individuals coming in that really aren't from here, that are just here to instigate stuff. From a law enforcement standpoint, clearly you know that we're responsible for the safety of everybody.
Yeah.
So I would agree too that we don't always get to truly sit back and listen and enjoy what was happening in front of us because we're always on guard. That really never changes for us.
Yeah.
Going into this, our families were very nervous because, again, our kids and our spouses, they see what's on the news.
Yeah.
And so they were really concerned. And though they're always kind of concerned about our safety to begin with, this was kind of heightened because of that. Going into it, I'd be lying if I said I wasn't nervous. I was very nervous about how this is going to go. Knowing also that I had to speak, and I think that there's those individuals that are waiting to pick apart anything you say. And to be fair, it's the same way if Tanya was talking, right? People are out there
absolutely
waiting to pick apart something that you say.
Right now, watching this, there are people
absolutely
doing that.
I don't think that people truly want to take the time and put forth the effort to get to know individuals. And I think once we all sit down and talk, you realize that I'm just like you.
Yeah. We're people.
We just have a different job that we do. So going into that, I think the longer that the event went on, the more that anxiety and the walls started coming down. I really believe that there was a lot of healing in our community that day. I really believe that. I think that we have a community of a lot of really great people that are willing to work together for a common goal. And that's what we have to have. You could see a second wave kind of come into that was a little bit different than what the original group was. I think anybody that was there could see that. There was kind of a second wave of people that came in. Those were the individuals that even Angela had come up to me and she had said, hey, when this is over, there's some that want to do a march, but this isn't us. And I think Tanya and I actually spoke too, going, look, that's not what we're trying to do. Our event was right here in the park, and that's what we wanted. And we've kind of gotten what it was that we wanted here out of this day. So then when we started walking, Assistant Chief Tommy Walters and myself were out front. And it's tough. It's tough to hear people chanting, using some profanity and saying racist police and that kind of stuff, because for us, I don't believe that we're racist. I don't believe that we operate that way. And for me as a chief, I've always wanted people to judge us based on our actions and how we've treated you,
not the actions of others,
not how somebody else has done something. And again, that's not to say that we don't have our own things that we need to work on, but I just wanted that opportunity for people to know us how we really are.
Which is what we all want, right? I mean, that's what we're looking for. Don't judge me based on your experience with somebody else or somebody who looks like me or whatever. That's just, I think, that's such a huge thing if we could all do that, not categorize, because I was talking to my wife about this last night. As human beings, we love to categorize people. Those people are fill in the blank. And to take a step back and say, no, you're Anthony Henderson. You're Tanya Johnson. You're a person right in front of me, and that's how we're going to relate, not based on something somebody else did. Anyway, I just think that's such a huge thing that we all need to be intentional about, especially with this issue. I think it's just one of these issues that no matter where you land on it, we just love to categorize. And I think that's, from my perspective, that's where Jesus was saying, hey, why don't you get that log out of your own eye before you start trying to deal with, so I love that. Thank you for saying that. Anything else you want to say there?
I just think that, I think it's worth me at least mentioning that, you know, even though the officers were hearing this, I was very impressed with our department and how we addressed and how we handled that whole event. Because I think that our officers really saw our community and the willingness to work together and the appreciation that they have for the department. I really felt that. I think we all felt that out there, is that we have a community that really does appreciate public safety. And that helps. I mean, it helps to bring those walls down for all of us. So walking along, we really didn't allow what was being said in the profanity and the racist comments and that kind of stuff to affect us, because we knew that that's not who we are.
Yeah.
So I think at the end of that, when it was completely over, I mean, we were drained. I think everybody was. We were exhausted.
I can't even imagine.
But even when we all four met, my statement to all of them was that, hey, what's next? Because majority of the individuals that are there, they won't be there for the next 364 days. That's the truth. I mean, a lot of individuals are there for one rally, one event, and you won't see them again in our community working together. So I told Angela and Tanya and Arlene, I said, I want this to be a regular meeting with us, whether we do that monthly, whether we do that quarterly or whatever.
That's
but
great.
If we're truly committed in what we're saying and we're willing to work together, we have to meet and we have to discuss these things. And I think that we also have to understand that we're going to come from different viewpoints. It doesn't mean that I'm wrong. It doesn't mean that they're wrong. It means that this is how we have that dialogue, and we have an understanding, a true understanding of each other, is for us to realize that we're going to come at things from different angles or different viewpoints. And I think that that's important. It's important for us to be able to grow that way and have a true understanding.
Yeah, it's good. Tanya, I mean, this is so obvious to say this, but obviously the relationship between law enforcement and people of color is strained in our country right now. And that's part of why you helped organize this rally. What are your hopes for the future? Where do you want this to go?
Well, I just want the statistics to change. So if you say you're not racist, I want it reflected in the numbers. You know what I'm saying? If you say you're not racist or it's not a racist system, I want it reflected in the staff. If you say you're not racist, it's not a racist system, I want it reflected in the rest, proportion to another race. And that's the problem. You can be a really sweet, nice person because we're humans and humans love humans. But what are you doing as far as the work? I want to see the work. I want to see I want to see diversity. I want to see that all the people that are in charge of hiring, if they look like you, I want to see that they hired people that didn't look like you. Yeah. And when you have the same type of people in the same places doing all the hiring, people connect to who they connect to. They like to stay in their tribes.
Sure.
If you're truly not racist, how do you reach outside of your tribe? And so I just want people to be able to really speak truth to power. And so he gave me his phone number. That doesn't mean that we're necessarily allies, but that means that the conversation has been open. Yeah. And then I feel like you can't hold people accountable if you don't even know who the people are. So I think that's a lot of people don't know how anything works. We don't know who's on city council. We don't know who's on school board. We don't know who runs this company. This is my first time meeting the chief. Like, how do you even hold anything accountable if you don't even know?
If you don't have any kind of relationship,
you don't have a relationship. You don't know who do you get to. At least here in Wylie, we can get directly to the chief. Imagine in a place like Dallas, how many people you have to go to get through to Chief Hall.
Yeah.
She's not going to pick up. There's going to be a secretary to
There's
the
a wall.
admin to the right.
Yeah.
There's going to be levels to this. So I do think Wylie is unique in that way. When it's like, oh, there's an issue, the community does know how to come together and use their voice and speak. So I do think there is that advantage there that we can easily have this dialogue. But I know in larger cities, this is not going to be able to happen because the statistics just don't uphold. So you can say all the things you want to, but when I go and look at those numbers, are people that look like me 2 to 3 times more likely to get arrested? Are people that look like me 10 times more likely to be victims of violent crimes? Are people like me going to jails with a higher sentence? So that's what I mean. And then also in this conversation, we always leave out Black women. So many Black women have also lost their lives, and there's so many violent crimes against us that we don't speak out as much. Like when George Floyd, that was immediate.
Yeah.
But when it's a woman, it's almost like Black women are still marginalized. So there's so much work to be done. There's still a lot of conversations and a dialogue to be had, but I don't know how you change anything if you do not want to have any of the conversations, because even after war, at some point, people have to go in and someone has to say, hey.
Exactly.
How do we do this?
And just blasting on social media is not going to necessarily bring that kind of change that you're talking about.
It's not, because after a while, people start getting tone deaf. And then what I also wanted to say, when it comes to racism, there's no two sides. It's racism or it's anti-racism. So when you say something like, oh, that's a nice person, when there's allegations of racism, and you're saying that because you only have a relationship with this side, then that right there, you're making a line and you're making a decision that you're going to be for racism. That doesn't necessarily mean you can't defend somebody you know, but that also means you have to go to the other side and you have to have relationships with these people so that you know
what's actually going on.
Right. You can't just dismiss somebody just because of relationships. And so that's just what I want people to get to know.
It's a really good point.
Yeah, it's a lot of conversation to be had. It's going to be ongoing. And like you said, I want to invite the community out because you need to be able to talk to your police officers. You need to be able to ask them the hard conversations. And that's just, and dialogue is where the future is going to start.
Yeah,
but
absolutely.
Right now, healing's only going to take place when we see actual quantifiable stats changing. And that would be in the numbers. When the ratios are 1 to 1, then I'll know there's change. So, yeah.
That's good. Thank you. Yeah, and like here in Wylie, for example, I mean, every Tuesday night, 6 o'clock, there's a city council meeting, and the public can go in and you can share, and after the meeting you can meet the council members, and I mean it's there if people want to engage it, but you're right, you have to take that step to actually say, man, I want to have a relationship with this person so I can actually have some influence, and that's what it takes. So well done. Yeah, Chief, as you know, the strain between law enforcement and people of color is a challenge at best right now. And talk about, what are your hopes?
That's a real good question. I mean, it really is, because you look at this and you go, it's not easy to figure out how we're going to make the change. Just listening to Tanya speak here, you go, I sat here and I was kind of thinking about what she was saying, and I think the change first, the conversations have to happen at home. Yeah. And I think that's what's missing sometimes, because I don't think you're born racist. I think it's something that you're taught, something that you learn along the way. I think that conversations have to be had at the house. And I think that the conversations we have to talk about I have to talk about it with my sons, and I have to talk about what's going on in society. Not to deviate too much, but I would like to share a little thing with you that for me, I had spoke after I was asked to speak at First Baptist Church after the 5 Dallas officers were killed. And I remember standing in my house. We have a little landing. We had a 2-story house. I was standing at the top, and I was actually doing laundry. And this was on the TV. And in my mind, I just kept, I was kind of watching this unfold, but without thinking about it, I was actually going, God, please, no more. I mean, let this stop. No more officers. I mean, because the number just kind of kept rising. You know, and one of them, you actually watched the officer killed on TV. And my 15-year-old at the time was 11, which is the age of my youngest now. And not really realizing that he's watching this and he's listening to what I'm saying or the impact that it would have, he asked me that night, he said, Dad, why do so many people hate police officers? Because that's what he's seeing on TV, right? He's taken all of this as they all hate police. And I admittedly said, when I was speaking at the First Baptist Church, is that I really don't remember what I said to him because I was so focused on what was happening. And so that day, I stepped down off the stage. And I had my son look around the whole congregation, and I said, this is proof right here that not everybody hates police. With this particular incident and looking back at that one, these are opportunities for me as a parent. It's my responsibility as a parent. Take the uniform off. Take the profession out of this. It's my responsibility as a parent to speak to my kids and help them have a better understanding of how we get to where we're at right now and how we change it. Because in my house, my boys don't understand treating Tanya different because she's a black woman, right? My boys they really don't understand that because we don't raise them that way. They see that, they hear that in front of them on a regular basis at school, and that they see these things. But I want my kids to be able to recognize when these things are happening, and I want them to have the courage to stand up and say, "I don't know.
That's not okay.
Stop it. I'm not going to associate with that. I'm not going to be around that because that's not who I am or what I'm about." So I really think that that's where it's got to start, in my opinion. I think after that, a lot of people want results, but they don't want to put in the work to get the results. And we have a huge responsibility. You have a huge responsibility as a pastor and leading a church. We have to be willing to work together. And what I ultimately hope is that we continue to build on what was a really great day. It can't die there. It can't end off there. It has to continue on. And the way we do that is I think we open up when we have these events downtown and we interact with people on the streets, that we have to let them see a different side of law enforcement. And I think we have to do such a great job as a law enforcement profession that if somebody said something about us, nobody else would ever believe that that was true. Because we have shown time and time again that we're completely different than that. And we have to be willing to talk about the elephant in the room.
Which is what we're doing.
And when we mess up, I think from a department standpoint, from a chief standpoint, when we make a mistake, we have to own it. We have to be transparent. We have to own it. We have to talk about how we're going to fix it and moving forward, how we're going to prevent it from happening again.
It's good.
And if you have to get rid of individuals that can't fall in line with those values and principles that we speak about and how we believe that we should treat people, if they can't do that, they can't work here.
Absolutely. This is great. I feel like I could talk to you two all day, but we're going to have to wrap this up. Any final comments, anything that you want to say or put in before we close out here?
I would just say do the work. Like, don't let this just attending a rally or just listening to this session be enough. Like you said, it has to change in households. A part of that is holding the people in your family accountable. Just being one to say, okay, that joke is not going to fly here anymore. You know,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Grandpa, you can't talk like this anymore. Like, you have to.
It's hard to say that to Grandpa,
right? But
you know,
but still,
it's true. Yeah, absolutely.
It's younger people that often changes the values in their family.
Yep.
And so you have to learn to hold the people that's even in your circle accountable.
Absolutely.
And then we just have to get over here like Black Lives Matter and thinking only their lives matter. It's Black Lives Matter too. That means to be included. We want to be inclusive. We want to change the trajectory of our faith in this country. And even as Christians, I feel like it's an easy concept to get, that you can have a chosen group of people. I mean, that's kind of why we're here, right?
Yeah.
So you understand that concept, and you understand that if Jesus was here, this would be a flip the table type of moment, right? This wouldn't be, let's go talk to the racists and change their hearts. We're going to say,
Sure.
it's not going to fly here. So I would say do the work. I would say educate yourself. I would say don't try to debate racism, but actually understand and listen. And I think that's the problem, is that people like, I have a Black friend, or I know Black people, and we do good deeds. It's also going back to, but what about that big faith? So you can't just
What about what?
That big faith. You can't just
Okay.
good deeds yourself
Yes.
out of racism. So I just want you to understand, you're fighting systems. You're trying to change it where everyone has access to the same thing and there's not a privileged class. So when we talk about these things, I think education is a big part of it, because when people hear Black Lives Matter, they kind of
Recoil.
recoil, and they want to say all lives matter or blue lives matter. Blue is a uniform. We're talking about humans, right? So let's get to seeing the humans in people, but also let's get to stop debating about it, and let's go really, really educate ourselves, and let's just do the work.
Yeah.
Like, this can't be the end. You can't say, oh, I checked that box and that covers you. No, you really have to make this a life change.
Yeah.
And so that's just my message. Go out, educate yourself, do the work, listen, stop debating racism, and help change the systems.
That's awesome. Thank you. Chief, anything else you want to say before we wrap up?
I think the last thing I really want to say is that I will admit that there was a point where I would say, I don't really see color, and that's not true. The meaning behind it is true. And this kind of came with, Mark Johnson as a sergeant with us, and he's over professional standards, was kind of talking about that before this. And he and I have a really good open dialogue with each other about race-related things. And
he's a Black man.
He is. And great guy. Really good conversations over the years. I mean, we've had great conversations. But it's through those conversations that I really realize myself, okay, that's not really a true statement. The meaning behind it is I'm not going to treat you any different because of that. And internally in my department, I'm that way. I don't really care whether you're male, female, white, Black, Hispanic. It doesn't matter to me. I've got supervisors that are Black, and they've earned that. And they've gotten to where they're at because of the hard work that they're willing to put in. So for me, those conversations that we've had, it's really opened up that dialogue, and it's helped me realize that, look, when I walk in here, I know that she's Black, and she knows that I'm white.
Yeah.
So we got to put all that stuff aside. And for us in law enforcement, what's really tough is we use descriptives a lot as our normal job. You may say it's a light colored truck, and I go, no, it's a white truck, extended cab, with all this other stuff, right? Or you say, yeah, there's a male standing over there on the corner. I'm going to say, no, it's a white male standing on the corner wearing this, right? So we're really used to doing a lot of descriptives. And we find ourselves sometimes, even when we're talking about a conversation that it really doesn't matter what race they are, we find ourselves putting that in there. And Mark Johnson was really one of the first people that go, what does it matter? But for us, we didn't mean it that way, right? But to hear him say that, I'll tell you now, I'll never forget that, right? So those are things that I try to be more aware of when we're speaking. because I think one of the ways that we get past racism is we stop seeing each other as a white man or a black man or Hispanic man or whatever, and I see you as a lady.
Yeah, you're Tanya.
And you see me
You're
as
Anthony.
a man, and by our names, and we get to know each other. And I think that that's what we have to do as a community.
Yeah. Good. Well, again, thank you guys so much for being a part of this conversation. Thanks to all of you who are still listening. You're hanging in there with us, and I hope it's been helpful for you. Again, the goal of this, of course, is awareness, but more importantly, I think, is building bridges and finding ways for us to connect and make genuine change so we can actually cross these barriers that keep popping up in our society over and over and over and over and over again, so we can be the people. We can be one people, a people united in the way that I believe God and our founders intended, even though some of them had slaves and they had to work through their issues too. And that's a whole thing about our history that we have to deal with and be honest about. But I believe that we are designed as a people to come together as one and treat each other as equals. And when we do that, man, it's beautiful, and that's where God's heart is, and that's where His blessing is. So thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week.
We're so much better together.